It's time now for the big story, and young gamblers could face a stake limit of £2 on online slot machines, according to new government proposals. The new white paper on gambling marks the biggest shake-up of regulation in the sector for nearly 20 years. But it begs the question, are changes to gambling rules an example of the nanny state in overdrive? And do we run the risk of demonising gamblers and treating them like children? To discuss this is the lifestyle economics whiz at the Institute for Economic Affairs, Christopher Snowdon. Hi, Chris. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Mark.
Thank you for giving up a chunk of your Friday night and your hashtag mojito time. What do you think of this white paper to essentially protect people from borrowing too much to gamble, especially when they're young?
I think there are two very worrying things about it. The first is something you've already alluded to, which is the idea that we're going to give special rules or provide special rules for people aged between 18 and 24, because essentially we don't think they're trusted. They're just apprentice adults, they're junior adults. They're not old enough to make up their own mind, although they're old enough to do everything else. They're old enough to have a sex change, they're old enough to vote, they're old enough to join the army and so on, but they're not old enough to know how much they want to put into an online slot machine. The other thing is the affordability checks. Which is a well-meaning policy in some respects, because you do get people, gambling online, maybe drunk, and they can lose in very rarely, but they can lose thousands of pounds. And of course, you read about these stories in the tabloid press all the time. And the idea is that somebody intervenes if you start losing that amount of money. Now, online gambling companies already intervene when people start showing hazardous patterns of play. The problem with the affordability check, I think, is that the threshold at which these triggers begin is very low. So the initial trigger will be at £500 a year spent on gambling. Lose £500 a year on gambling, and there will be what they call a frictionless check, which will look at whether you've got a county court judgment or whether your business has been bankrupt, whether you've been bankrupt in the past. And that's actually a lot of people. £500 a year is not very much to spend on any leisure activity, and a lot of people have had CCJs, okay? So my question is, what then happens? There's another step, by the way, later on, if you lose £2,000 in the course of 3 months, which wouldn't be unusual for, serious gamblers, not problem gamblers, just people who like gambling, people who are into horse racing and so on. They would see a £2,000 win over the course of 3 months, or a £2,000 loss over 3 months as not being a big deal, really, right? But that then triggers an even more intensive affordability check, which potentially involves you having to show your bank statements and what have you to online gambling companies. But even then, it's not clear in the white paper what actually happens. Are these people going to be banned from gambling on every online website, because they'll all be joined together in some way? And if not, what's the point of this, right? They're saying these are not going to be intrusive checks. If they're not intrusive, they're not going to really find out whether you can afford to gamble. If you've got the money, by definition, you can afford to gamble in some sense. And if they're not going to kick you off, how is this going to reduce problem gambling? So it's very vague, and I suspect that in the consultation phase, a lot of this will kind of crumble.
Yes, you do wonder, don't you? Christopher, let's bring my pundits in if I can. We've got the journalist Duncan Larcombe, Precious Muir, who's a broadcaster and political commentator, and UKIP leader Neil Hamilton. Duncan, what's your view on this attempt to protect people from themselves?
Well, I think I speak from personal experience. My older brother was a very successful guy in the city. He'd never talked about gambling. He wouldn't place bets or anything. And then we found out, actually, over a period of 2 years, he had developed a gambling addiction and gambled more than £750,000. Frankly, destroyed his marriage and destroyed an awful lot more besides. It is a secret addiction. You do not see it creeping up, as you might perhaps with someone that drinks alcohol too much or takes drugs. It is a real horrible thing when it's in your family. But having said that, it's one of those things now. This is lip service. Surely this is just lip service. You cannot ban gambling. Gambling is a pastime for people that a lot of people enjoy perfectly legitimately. And I think if the abuse is there, it's going to be there. So I worry, really. I mean, if you're 18 years old and you carry around a mobile phone, you're carrying around one of the world's biggest casinos in your pocket. How on earth are you going to rein that in? It's not enough. And frankly, it's just the awareness that needs to be raised.
Well, Duncan, are there any government protections, stricter rules that could have protected your brother from losing £250,000?
It was £750,000.
Sorry, three-quarters of a million.
Yeah, three-quarters of a million. No, frankly, I don't think so, because the only time that we found out it was a problem was when he had hit absolute rock bottom and, frankly, was either looking at going to prison or committing suicide. It was a horrendous time, and something that, I'm very proud of him to say that he now campaigns and is a reformed gambler. But no, something needs to be done. But what that something is, I'm not sure that either side of the gambling debate can even agree.
OK. Neil, what do you think about this? I know you're a bit of a libertarian. You don't like a big state snooping on our lives.
No, I think this is utterly pointless and unnecessary intrusion. Plenty of things that the government can do which would be useful to us. We learned from the papers today that there are 4,000 pieces of EU legislation that the government's identified as useless and want to get rid of, but they haven't got time to do the job before the next election. They can only get rid of 800 of them. So, why don't they stop trying to police the unpoliceable, as in these gambling proposals, and get on with doing something useful? I mean, gambling, everybody who has got half a brain knows that gambling is a mug's game, and you're almost bound to lose. The house has always got the odds in its favour. I like going to the races and having a flutter. I expect to lose a certain amount of money on the day. It's fun if you win, but over a lifetime you're probably going to lose your shirt or what price you put on your shirt. When I was a kid, my very first job was working in an amusement arcade with fruit machines, and I actually made a lot of money out of gambling because I got to know all the combinations of the fruit machines, so I knew when they would win by observation, and so I watched how much money people were putting in, and then I swooped to scoop the pool at the right moment. That's the only way to go gambling, in my view.
What a canny operator. I mean, you're all clearly gamblers. You're on GB News, but Precious, what do you think about this? You're a bit younger than some of my other pundits. You're closer to the age group protected. But because the argument is that a young person can destroy their life with these online games, and therefore, until they've reached about 24, there should be some kind of checks and balances. What do you think?
I think I agree. I honestly do, because I feel like if there is no set rules and regulations, you can end up losing 750,000. So there has to be something in place where, I'm not saying they have to completely control the lives of these people, but there does have to be some sort of boundaries, because going to the casino and having a little gamble on an occasion or with friends is totally different than sitting at 2 a.m. in the dark on your phone gambling. Those are two very different things. And so there has to be some form of control, because people will literally lose the shirts off their back and their homes and their families if this doesn't get set in place. And I agree they should.
Chris Snowdon, finally, if these new regulations, if they help one family, surely they're worth it.
Yeah.
Well, how much is it going to cost? Are we really saying that? I mean, would we say that about anything else? No, if it costs £100 billion, clearly it wouldn't be worth it, because you could use the money in better ways. And it's not the way to look at it. And actually, unfortunately, one of the worrying things about this campaign over the last few years for all these new gambling restrictions, it's been entirely based on anecdotal evidence and very sad stories about people who've killed themselves. And hard cases really do make bad law. And shroud waving as a basis for public policy is not the way to go. You need to look rationally at these things. The whole purpose of people being pushed on the TV and talking about how their child killed themselves and they were a problem gambler is to get you so emotional that you don't think about the policy. You don't think about the costs and benefits and trade-offs. And you just go with anything. We're getting in a situation now where there's a bit of a turning point in the last few days, actually, in which we're starting to look at gambling like tobacco. And that's what the public health lobby wants. The thing that they really liked from this legislation that's been overlooked is this huge levy that's been put on the gambling industry, which I'd like to see go to the NHS to treat problem gamblers. A lot of it is going to get siphoned off towards various public health academics and activists to campaign for more and more regulation in a sort of anti-tobacco style, in which not just problem gambling is presented as being the problem, but gambling per se.